For those of you who haven't seen it, this is my novel. They'll be happy to order it for you here, although it's not available for sale. But if you meet me in the parking lot, we can work something out. If you're interested. And that was fun. I'm self-timing myself, so. We are today I'm going to be reading the first chapter from my second novel, Work in Progress. It's going to be a present day novel. This one was set in the near future. This upcoming novel is going to be set in the present day. It's the story of a young newspaper reporter who ends up at a small town newspaper in South Carolina. And through coincidence and misadventure ends up covering a story wherein a couple of local junior league ladies claim to have been contacted by ghosts during the ghost tours that they run for tourists and other folks who come to visit the town. So he is drawn into this story, and this is the first chapter in which the first ghost makes his appearance. Chapter 1, in which a young warrior faces trials upon the field of battle. Wade Hampton Mulligan III died just as he was instructed, and precisely on cue. The problem was that one of his fellow reenactors, a man he didn't recognize but who seemed to know what he was talking about, apparently disagreed with his timing. "Get up, boy," growled the figure, who sported a blonde mustache curled with wax. By his uniform, he was someone of high rank in the Army of the Confederacy. "Get up and fight. I do not, by reputation or practice, brook a single layabout or Sunday soldier in my army, so you take that rifle up and advance on the enemy as ordered." "But I'm supposed to be dead, sir." The officer put his hands on his hips, took a wide stance, and regarded Wade with a suspicious squint. "Dead? Dead? Soldier, I know dead when I lay eyes on it, and dead is what you most certainly are not." The heat of the May morning and the din of mock combat consumed Wade and threw him off. This was his first battle, and he'd gone along simply because so many of his friends from Scout Troop 453 were so into it. This wasn't at all what he had expected. He sweated like a horse inside the stifling wool uniform. Shouted orders and the sounds of the pretend dying and wounded drifted past in the cacophony of mock battle. Smoke from blank musket charges enveloped the field like a dense sulfurous fog that smelled like what hell would, according to a Sunday school teacher at Carleton First Baptist. It obscured his view of his fellow reenactors and prompted him to wonder where exactly this man came from and who he was. Wade tried to get a fix on the man's hazy form through the black powder smoke. "Sorry, sir, but my scoutmaster said I was supposed to charge ahead, count to 15 Mississippi, and drop dead." "Who are you with?" "Are you blind, boy? You don't know your commanding officer when you see him? Why, if I weren't so badly in need of men, I'd have you shipped home so you could keep hanging on your mama's apron strings where you so evidently belong." "Sorry, sir, I just didn't recognize you, that's all." This was becoming less fun by the moment. Wade began to wonder what the appeal was for his friends, because being yelled at by adults playing what amounted to a much more expensive game of guns and dress-up really wasn't his thing. If this is what it took to make Eagle Scout, he was rapidly losing interest. "Allow me to edify you then, boy, and remember this, because if I see you playing possum on my battlefield again, my wrath will be swift and harsh. I am General Brevard Boykin, and you can consider yourself on report." Behind the general, Wade then saw another figure, this one leaving twirling contrails as he ran through the rifle smoke. "Wade, where are you, son? You okay?" It was Mr. Ream, his scoutmaster, and he was headed straight for the general. "Mr. Ream, right here, but watch out, there's someone in your way." Sorry, my pages got out of order. "Where? I can't see anyone but you." The last thing Wade remembered from the battlefield was the figure of his scoutmaster plunging through that of the mustachioed general, the archaic image dispersing in swirls of musket smoke until only Mr. Ream remained. "Sorry," Wade said just before passing out. "My bad." Wade awoke in the shade of a Carleton County Hospital ambulance, supine on a stretcher with Mr. Ream, the man in charge of organizing the reenactment, and a third who, by his dress, was a modern-day police officer standing in the open bay. Still bleary, he thought how comforting it was to see someone in uniform who didn't look as if he'd stepped through a time warp. Then he heard Mr. Ream yell the last thing any 16-year-old ever wants to hear shouted from a grown-up. "Anyone know where Wade left the bag with his civvy so we can get him some dry britches?" Wade felt like he died for real and groaned as the policeman sat up on the jump seat normally reserved for the EMT. If there was indeed a good and merciful God in heaven, as the folks at church insisted, none of his fellow scouts would ever find out he peed himself, and if they did, he'd be struck dead on the spot. The officer leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, cracked open a sweaty bottle of spring water, and offered it to Wade. "I'm Officer Lee, Wade. How are you doing?" He took a long swig. It helped. "Okay, I guess. What happened?" "Well, the EMTs suspect that between the high temps today and you not being used to the wool uniform, you got a touch of heat stroke. Mr. Ream got worried because it was your first time out there, I guess, and found you about 30 feet from where the line started its charge. You said something to him as he ran up and then went out like a light." "Oh, man. But what happened to that other man, the general?" "Sorry, you were the only one there. Everyone else was accounted for." The policeman looked young, less like Wade's dad and more like one of his 20-something uncles, like he'd be one of the fun grown-ups at a family reunion instead of one of those who was always telling him to be more mature. It made Wade feel a little bit more comfortable continuing this line of discussion. "There was another man," he half-whispered to Officer Lee, keeping Mr. Ream in sight to make sure he didn't overhear. "Said he was a general. He had a mustache curled up on the sides and kept hollering at me to get up and fight. Then when Mr. Ream ran up, he just disappeared." Officer Lee had pulled a little spiral-bound notebook from his left shirt pocket and was now scribbling notes with a ballpoint pen. "And did you see which way this man went when Mr. Ream showed up?" No, he didn't run off. He disappeared, like into thin air. First he was there, and then he was just gone, like smoke." Officer Lee had stopped writing. He looked up, and Wade could tell he was trying not to let his emotion show. "Dude obviously thinks I'm nuts," Wade thought. "And did he tell you his name?" Lee continued. "Yes, sir. He said he was General Brevard Boykin." Officer Lee wrote that down, then turned to Mr. Ream and the event organizer. "Sir, did you have anyone here today portraying," he referred to his notepad, "General Brevard Boykin?" No, said the organizer guy as if it were the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard. "We were doing Shiloh today. Boykin was at Gettysburg." "Sure, of course, thanks," Lee said. "Funny thing, though," the organizer continued, "Boykin was originally from Carleton. His grave is just across the highway in the old Quaker cemetery. It's a big old obelisk like something you'd see in Egypt. Can't miss it." "Appreciate it," Lee said. "Okay," Wade said, staring down at his water and damp uniform pants. "Apparently I saw a Civil War general from a completely different battle who just happens to be buried in a cemetery half a mile from here?" "So it would seem," Lee said, clicking his pen to retract the point. "Officer Lee, I'm really not crazy. I did talk to someone and he really did disappear. You believe me, right?" "I believe you saw what you saw, Wade. And just to be certain, we're going to keep an eye out for someone who fits this description in case there really is a wayward reenactor running around." "Thanks," Wade said, happy to know he wasn't being written off as a complete lunatic. "And Officer Lee, can you do me a favor?" "Sure thing. Can you make sure we keep the whole pants thing out of the police report? My dad reads those in the paper every week, and things would not be cool at my house if he saw that." Officer Lee was standing at the doors of the ambulance now and cracked a little smile. "You got it, Wade. Consider it done.